this evening are incumbent Vanessa Fleisch, Imker and Dar Thompson. And if our panel is ready, we'll have the first question.
Good evening. See, we're going to start with Mayor Fleisch first, I believe. Do you favor extending TDK Boulevard into Coweta County? Why or why not?
I'm glad you started with the softball of the night because it's really important to me. Right now, Coweta County has platted on 1,600 acres on the other side of TDK 3,000 homes. Under those conditions, of course not, because that would just add to the traffic problem along crosstown, obviously TDK into 74. It would not help our traffic situation at all.
Mr. Imker.
Good evening, folks. I agree with Mayor Fleisch entirely on this issue. We do not need that kind of traffic coming into Peachtree City. I remember about 7 years ago, the council, Peachtree City, purposely acquired a 10-foot swath of land for about a mile on that side of the city to make sure that no bridge, tunnel, or any other road could get over to our city via that route. And the reason was, if they wanted to try, they'd have to get approval of the city council. They'd have to buy off 3 of the council members to do it. Not going to happen. Some of the arguments I heard was, well, Crosstown Road Shopping Center is a dying shopping center, and it needs to have additional customers. And I say, no. The owner of that shopping center just invested $2 million into it several years ago. Kroger just invested over $1 million. They're not going to invest that money if it's a dying shopping center. Besides, think of the other side of the equation. Coweta is going to build their homes. They're not going to have empty shopping. They're going to build shopping centers on that side. They're not going to come over to Peachtree City just to do their shopping. So that argument of connecting falls apart right there. We don't need that traffic on Crosstown or 74. Thank you.
Hey, thanks. Am I too close or too far? Thank you for coming tonight. It's a very good question. It's a very complicated question. One thing I want to make very clear, even though I'm sitting on the far left, I'm sitting on your right. So, regarding the TDK Boulevard issue, obviously this has been something that was approved approximately 25 to 30 years ago. It's been looked at. Planterra actually even moved golf holes for this thoroughfare over from Peachtree City to Coweta County. And Vanessa's right. There are 1,600 acres on the other side that's being developed. But to be totally honest with you, I have looked at a 468-page traffic study, and I read every bit of it. And what that traffic study said is, what the experts and the engineers said is, we have to look at every thoroughfare, all the way south to Rockaway Road, all the way north through the middle of Tyrone. I am not a traffic expert, but what I would say is, we need to address every single possibility, every single issue, not be short-sighted on the subject, but most importantly, transparent with the citizens of our city and let them know exactly what we're doing. This is the first time you've ever heard that there's 1,600 homes over there. I haven't heard it.
3,000.
3,000 homes.
It's already platted.
So, but we would be transparent with the city and bring in traffic engineers and look at all the options that are available. Thank you.
Okay, welcome. This question was handed in, and it was specifically for Mr. Imker and Mr. Thompson. And it reads, what community services have you led last year before running as a candidate this year?
That's a very awkward question for a forum like this. I was hoping to have more questions on issues facing Peachtree City. Before I actually start, there's a good, at least a dozen seats up here that are empty if people want to come and find seats. I'm still trying to think, as I was saying that,
Sure.
what that question was asking. Could you say it again, please?
It's asking about any community service projects that you might have been involved in prior to becoming a candidate.
Well, over the last year, one of the biggest things I did was assist the citizens with their fair market value assessments. Back in March, April timeframe, we all got our assessed values, and I considered it a community service with what I did. I appealed and actually took it through the Board of Equalization. They denied, I appealed again. I wound up eventually appealing to Fayette County Superior Court, and I actually won. But aside from that, what happened was I went online and I wrote almost a 3,000-word essay on how I succeeded in appealing, and I gave a short version and a long version. And people appreciated that. Then I even held a workshop at the city library a month later, and I had several dozen people come in and ask about how did they appeal, and I helped them with that. So, sure, plenty of folks took advantage of that. That's the main thing I think I've done over the last year. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Thompson?
And please repeat the question exactly.
Okay, exactly. What community services have you led last year before running as candidate this year?
Well, it's kind of a sensitive question because a lot of what we do through my companies is we do donations, we help in the community, but we try to keep that private as possible. Personally, on a personal level, I have not actually gone out into the community and done things. We've done things with the family, with my children, such as bring food to some of the shelters, battered women's shelters, but actually being ahead of a community effort. We do that pretty extensively through the fitness centers and through some of my real estate projects, and I'm not comfortable in telling you what they are. If someone wants to really talk to me one-on-one of that, I might be willing to explain some of those. We do, and I will mention one, we do every year we give $2,000 a scholarship to one of the Fayette County schools we've done it 500 scholarships for 4 kids, or else we may go to 2,000 for 1 kid, or 1 student, I should say, not kid, and then maybe $1,000 for 2 kids, just depending on the applications that we get. But we try to do a lot through the community, through the businesses.
Thank you.
All right, we'll start with Mr. Thompson, and this is for all three. Peachtree City is a planned community featuring step zoning. Tell us about your commitment to the plan.
Well, it's a really good question. The planned city is now we've basically reached our borders. So the real question is, what is the next plan for the next 10, 5, 10, 15, 20, and even 50 years? I know earlier annexation was brought up. You have to understand that annexation is not something the city can actually just reach across and do. The landowner has a big say in what happens in annexation. There was an issue about the West Village not being all the homes over there, and that should have been industrial. But that's not totally up to the city. If the landowner does not want it to be industrial, then it cannot get annexed in. So we have to, what we really have to do is not be short-sighted and be open to every single option that's available to us. Whether that means annexing outside of the city or redeveloping portions of the city and addressing those issues with an open mind. I think from my position, Peachtree City is an exceptional city. It has great bones. But from 20 years ago to now, we've done nothing. While other cities we were here and other cities have continued to do this, and I'll get into that later in my closing statements, we're not attracting the people that we used to attract and need to attract, and we're not attracting the businesses we need to attract. So that's kind of my position there.
All right, Mayor Fleisch.
This year, we went through the comprehensive plan process, and that is every 10 years, and it deals with land use and what the aspirations and the goals are of our community. And there were 5 citizen volunteers who were on that board, and we had a series of meetings, and they were wonderful, because what we did was we got to discuss transportation and utilities and traffic and the housing stock of our community. And that was a very important series of meetings. And at the end of it, we have the document that goes up to DCA and the ARC, and it had recently had approval. And those were very insightful, because what we learned was that there are people that crave kind of a downtown kind of thing within the city. So because 54 and 74 within 5 to 10 years is not going to look like it does today, one of the things that came out of the comprehensive plan process was the application for a grant to study the whole area from 5474, from that intersection through City Hall. And if we get that grant, they're applying in Thanksgiving and hopefully at the beginning of next year. And what we can do is look at what plans, what ways can we redevelop that area.
Mr. Imker.
Please read the question again so the audience knows what I'm answering.
Peachtree City is a planned community featuring step zoning. Tell us about your commitment to that plan.
I will offer the same comment about Mr. Thompson. We're built out, pretty much 99% built out. I'm disappointed over the last several years or decade or so. The planning originally was close to city center, you have quarter-acre residential lots. The further away you get radially out, you increase to half-acre lots, and even further out to 2-acre lots. That was destroyed with the West Village concept out there, where we're going to be adding 1,300 new quarter-acre lots on the west side of the city, way out there. There should have been half-acre at least lots, reducing the number of residences out there. The zoning or the annexation comments, it reminds me of a humorous comment from the first time I was on council. Before we actually became council members, we had a practice council with a practice agenda item. And one of the agenda items said, annexation of Tyrone. And we all legitimately went through the process of what would we do to annex Tyrone? Well, we're done annexing. It has to be a really good case. If it's going to be residential, it needs to be acre-type lots, because the middle of the city is already built out. That's the kind of approach I'd like. We need to stop rezoning our last best industrial sites to residential. The ratio of residential to industrial has been messed up now. We need more jobs in the city, meaning more industrial. There's an agenda item outstanding to change more industrial to residential coming up. They tabled it until after the election. Watch for that agenda item in the near future. Thank you.
Okay, we'll start with Mr. Thompson. The traffic experts at GDOT are working on a solution to the 5474 problem and have allocated $10 million to the study. What would you do differently or interject to the analysis of the problem?
Very good question. Again, it goes back to that's part of the study that was done in June of 2014. The study may have been actually done prior to that. That's when the report was given. That study says that that's not going to fix the problem. It's not going to come close to fixing the problem. The actual solution to the problem, which I'm not sure that I agree with, we can get into that later because that's a long conversation, is $55 million. The $10 million, let's just be clear on the $10 million. The $10 million has been allocated and put aside for that project. The engineer has not even addressed that project yet. We spoke to the engineer last week. They're putting $1 million into the engineering. They will address the issue to see if it makes sense. If it's actually going to help the traffic, to move traffic along. They don't know. And he told me that if it does not, create a viable benefit to the traffic flow at 7454. They're not moving forward with the $10 million, and that $10 million goes away. So we do not have the 10, just to be very clear, we do not have $10 million, we have it allocated. If all the particulars work out with the engineer, they're going to move forward with that project. But again, in that traffic study, it said it's 5474 is not the answer. It is a volume issue that you have to, and this is something I simply cannot understand, is that traffic report was done 4 years ago, and it tells you the other areas you need to address, and no one has addressed them. That's where my big concern is. We look at one thing at a time. We don't look at more than one thing at a time. We have to address everything. We have to start moving forward.
Thank you. Mayor Fleisch?
Please repeat the question.
The traffic experts at GDOT are working on a solution to the 5474 problem and have allocated $10 million to the study. What would you do differently or interject to the analysis of the problem?
First, this study came about, it started in 2013, and I invited Councilman Imker, the folks from the Transportation Department in Coweta County, as well as GDOT, and they invited the folks from GDOT in Atlanta. And we all sat downstairs in the community room, remember? And they said, in order to get anything moving in Peachtree City, because our relationship had been so fragmented through the years, that we needed to do a traffic study ourselves. And what we addressed, and it was on the board, short, medium, and long-term solutions for 54. Prior to that, everything had been looked at was just at Line Creek. This is the first comprehensive look at that domino theory across 54. So what I have interjected when Mr. Wellborn, unfortunately I didn't get to attend that meeting, but that was a meeting that I tried to get for a very long time because he is the man that is in charge of allocating the money. And we got $10 million out of a possible 30 for the entire state for Peachtree City alone, a third of a $30 million pot. My interjection or my suggestions to them were to look at burying the utilities, possible tunnels like they did on the south side of 74, and landscaping, because again, that corner is not going to look that way in 10 years.
Thank you. Mr. Imker?
7454 possible engineering enhancement to improve traffic flow. That's a lot of money to spend to save maybe 10, 15 seconds going through that intersection. That's not the problem. We all know it. The problem is the 5 additional traffic lights just west of that intersection. Made worse by the addition of that 5th traffic light for the overlook development. $10 million, like Mr. Thompson said, it is not a guarantee, and nor will the GDOT guarantee that it's on a project list right now. But their engineers are going to come out and examine, like Mr. Thompson said, and they're going to find out that, hey, if we spend $10 million on this intersection, what are we going to gain for it? They're not going to do it. They're going to say, this project is not worth doing. There might be some small enhancements that they might spend $500,000 or $1 million doing for turn lanes and things like that. But we're going to have to ask them to re-look at that $10 million and maybe use it at different intersections along that corridor. That's where we might get some help. But there's other solutions to the 54 traffic flow. The damage has been done, but we can contribute to a little bit of the solution, but it's not going to solve it entirely.
Mayor Fleisch, Stormwater Authority fees. What are annual revenues? How are annual revenues accounted for?
The, say the beginning part again.
Stormwater Authority fees.
Right. We took out a $9 million bond, and it's a 15-year bond, and that's what your fees are going towards. And so what we decided back with Councilman Imker, we decided that because there might be too much of a burden for folks, we split up the fees to help pay for that bond. That bond has paid for the 2 dams that were replaced at Kedron Ponds, the Rock Spray Pond, on Peachtree Parkway where the new guardrail is. That was preventing Peachtree Parkway from caving in there because they had already done 2 Band-Aid projects that also paid for Spear Road. So that's where your money is going, and it's very much a very restricted fund. And right now, the reason why it went up is because of the $9 million bond that we took out in order to fix things.
Mr. Imker.
Appreciate Ms. Fleisch's answers. They're accurate. Mr. Thompson is going to be at a disadvantage because he didn't live through the decisions that the council did 6 years ago or so. The $9 million bond is actually a combination of a previous leftover bond of about $4 or $5 million at a very high interest rate. And it was suggested at the time with the assistance of the city finance director to get another bond, $4 or $5 million, add the old bond to it and come in with a 2% interest rate. So that's how it became a $9 million bond. The real story on why your fees doubled was because the city took their own stormwater fee that they were paying out of the general fund and decided at the time, we were really crunched for money, we moved that over to the individual property owners of the city, freeing up that money in the general fund. And essentially it was a hidden tax increase. It's not a tax when it's a stormwater fee because all the residents pay it. If it's a tax, like in a millage rate, exempt properties don't, like churches and other nonprofits. So that was one of the reasons. That was about half of the bill. And so we can reduce it in half back to the way it was with proper financial management. And I'll share that with you later. Thank you.
I'll be totally honest with you, I'm glad I didn't get that question first. Can I just go along with both of them said? Because I think that's the stance I'm going to take. The only issue is, I've heard some conflicting reports. I believe it was the one dam at Roxbury Pond that may not have been necessary, but that's just speculation. And I don't know what the exact cost of that was. I believe it was about $2.4 million, if I remember correctly, but I could be wrong on that. But I believe Mr. Eric Imker is correct, and I'm at a disadvantage as I was not part of any of this due to the stormwater issues. That's a politician being honest.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to start with Mr. Imker with this one. This question reads, Pinewood is creating unsustainable high dollar amounts in rental housing in Peachtree City. $1,600 a month for 1,350 square feet as an example. What do you suggest to slow down or stop neighborhoods from becoming rental properties?
Well, first, I'm not aware of the facts of that statement. I generally try to say to government, stay out of the business world as much as you can. Let the marketplace take its role. As far as rental properties overwhelming the rest of the city, I really don't see that happening. If some of the rental properties become very high, that's the marketplace. I'm not going to get in there as a government official and try and control that. What I will try and do is help the residential neighborhoods improve their development. Like as a previous question to the other council members for post 3 earlier tonight, redevelopment of those neighborhoods as residential homes will help. And the way you do that with infrastructure improvements of their roads, their landscaping, their cart path access, and like Mr. Logson said, with help with potentially taxes. But those are for property owners and the homeowners that live there. I just don't see the residential or the rental properties overwhelming us the way it's been described.
Thank you. Mr. Thompson?
Yeah, can you repeat the question? Because I think the intention was maybe just a little bit different, so I want to address that.
Okay. Pinewood is creating unsustainable high dollar amounts in rental housing in Peachtree City. $1,600 a month for 1,350 square feet, as an example, what do you suggest to slow down or stop neighborhoods from becoming rental properties?
Well, for the most part, I do agree with Mr. Imker on this, but I think what I've been hearing is the big issue is, and somebody's going to have to, I think they're called Airbnbs, is that what they're called? So I've talked to several people on this. What seems to be happening, a lot of the grippers, a lot of the people on the set, they're not necessarily leasing 1,300 square feet, they're leasing a basement of a house. And that seems to be a lot more, I'm finding, than probably a lot of us realize. The concern I have there is that we can't, as a city government, I think we need to get a hold of this, because in other words, instead of these people staying in hotels, they're staying in someone's house in a basement. And we're not getting the hotel motel tax, we're not getting other taxes they would pay, and the homeowner is not paying a business tax. I actually talked to one of the homeowners that's doing this, and he said he would have no problem paying the pro rata share of the hotel motel tax, nor would he have a problem having a business license. So I think the bigger issue is, I don't think there's a lot of 1,300 square foot houses out there that people are doing this. I think it's more of an issue of people renting basements or renting upstairs. And if that's the case, then it's affecting our hotel motel tax. And we need to require that these people, if we're going to allow something of this nature, to really investigate, to get business licenses for this, and also the taxes associated with it as well.
Thank you. Mayor Fleisch, would you like to take a stab at that one?
Sure. If it's straight rentals and not the Airbnb as he was describing, rentals make about 20% of the homes in Peachtree City. And believe it or not, we have a very low percentage compared to some of our neighbors, which is a good thing because you encourage home ownership because of the pride in home ownership. And what we've been able to do over the past 4 years is improve all of the infrastructure within the city so that the prices have gone up. And what you've seen a lot of are people who let their houses become rental properties during the downturn, during the recession, who are now realizing the gains that the market has had. So in that respect, you're seeing less rentals because they're selling them to single-family homes, single-family homes. And so, like in 14, your property value went up 2.78%. In 15, 8.95%. In 16, 7.71%. In 2017, year over year, 12.66%. So I had clients that had divorced and or they were close to losing their homes and they became rentals. But then when the market went up, they were able to sell them. So that's the other side of the story.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Thompson, this one's directed specifically to you, and then we can allow the other two candidates to comment if they like. Mr. Thompson, your development company sued the city, which is certainly your right. Why did you do that, and what is the status of the lawsuit? Won't this be a conflict of interest if you are elected?
That's the question you guys got. It's very simple. I am a managing member in a company called High Sierra Investments. It owns property at Lexington. I am a managing member of that company. I have a fiduciary obligation to the shareholders of that company. What had taken place, to try to oversimplify, the city council is 4.8 acres to be rezoned. They did not rezone the 4.8 acres. They rezoned, let's call it 3.25 acres. The remaining parcel was LUC 16, which allowed for townhomes. They had a second vote the same night to remove townhomes off of my property and devalue my property. So the issue is, for me, is much more of landowners' rights. And what we have is landowners and government dictating what we do. Now, the judge in the case said that High Sierra Investments did not exhaust all their administrative remedies in the case. It did not rule off of the merit of the case that the city did anything right. It did not say that the city did anything wrong. That issue is irrelevant when it comes to running the city or being on the council or mayor. I would think it's a very complicated answer. I'm getting a short time to answer it. But long story short, our ordinances are important. And if we don't follow our ordinances, we have a huge problem. If you look at the minutes of that meeting, they were never brought up in court. The minutes of that meeting, they never addressed, they had 2 votes with 1 public hearing. The issue of removing townhomes out of LU16 never went to the planning commission, which is required by ordinance. And last thing, I'll be done. When they removed townhomes off of LUC16, they removed it off the entire Lexington overlay, not just my property. It was not on the agenda. The LU16 was 4.88 acres. They removed it off the entire property.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson.
Mayor Fleisch, would you care to comment?
Just that the city prevailed in that suit because, as Mr. Thompson said, that the judge said that you basically jumped the gun, because you didn't exhaust your administrative remedies, and in order to make it proceed, what you should have done was submit plans and let the city deny you, and then you could have filed suit. So I just think that it was kind of, but to say that the city didn't follow its own ordinances, I think is very incorrect, and the judge said as much.
I'm not going to touch this one. No comment.
Okay, this is for Mayor Fleisch. How much of our cash reserves have been used since you've become mayor?
I'm not sure how much we've used per se, but we're up above the 20% to like 34% in reserves right now, which is a very good place to be. And the SPLOST money has already started coming in, and we've already started the SPLOST projects. And the budget is a very sound and lean budget. And so I'm very happy with where we are with our reserves right now.
Thank you. And Mr. Imker, when would you agree to the use of cash reserves?
Well, first of all, the reserve level was raised on my last year at council from 20 to 25%. And I recommended that because I was looking out for our AAA credit rating for the city. I showed council about 6 or 7 criteria that credit agencies use to determine that, and our weakest point was our reserve level, 20%. So we had a vote, and it was 4-1 to change it to 25%, which is greatly going to assist maintaining our AAA credit rating. I was disappointed to see that $1 million of cash reserves were used with the pay raise that was implemented outside of a budget cycle, mid-budget actually, and I was told to my face, oh, well, there won't be any tax increases or use of city reserves. Well, that clearly wasn't true. Our reserves, like Mayor Fleisch has said, is up around 33-34%. Every percent above this 25% is equivalent to about $250,000 to $300,000-$400,000. I think it wouldn't be a hardship to actually use some of that and bring it down to say around 30% and use that money to assist the other budget goals that I want to describe later. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Thompson?
Repeat the question, please.
Sure. When would you agree to the use of cash reserves?
Well, I think it's, I think Eric put it pretty well. You can have too much cash at some point, but at the same time, you want to make sure you maintain your bond rating and have a true safety net there. I would look at some of the maybe the short-term expenses that we have, or if we're coming to end of some of our expenditures that we can pay off or pay down. But at some point, there's no need to have additional cash sitting doing nothing for you when you can use it much more efficiently. So I think that as long as you can maintain your bond rating, that's what's most imperative.
Thank you.
Let's see, where are we, Mr. Imker?
Am I first this time?
I think you are.
Let's go.
All right, this sounds like your type of question anyway. At this time, are there any areas of the budget with which you disagree?
Absolutely. Can I have their 2 minutes as well? Sure. With SPLOST passing this last spring, that was the largest tax revenue increase in the history of this city, $46 million. I've stayed in touch with the city finance director, and the mayor's correct. We are now receiving our monthly allocation. Revenues are actually higher than expected, and we're going to actually get more than the $46 million anticipated. We're going to approach $50 million with that SPLOST. I know how to leverage that money with the current city budget. It's easy. If you can lower the mill rate by at least 1 mil, lower our taxes, not some pseudo mill rate reduction that doesn't lower our taxes. We can actually get rid of that second stormwater bill every year. We can actually, with proper management, put the right people in charge of WASA and get those costs under control. It's not going to eliminate them. We're going to still be paying a high price because WASA's got a problem with their revenue and expenses issue. But we can lower that with the assistance of proper management. So with all those things coming together, I've seen in my mind how we can lower that mill rate. And I need to address that individually with each council member and show it to them in black and white how it can be done. And trust I'd get 3 votes to make it happen. Thank you.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes, can you repeat the question again, please? Just want to make sure.
Sure. At this time, are there any areas of the budget with which you disagree?
Well, I spent several hours with Paul Salvatore yesterday, and we're pretty much in agreement with the budget. I would disagree a little bit. It's kind of a mixed bag. I kind of agree with Eric, but I kind of disagree with Eric in the sense because the SPLOST money are our capital improvements. And when the 6 years is up, you're going to have that shortfall. You're going to have to continue maintenance and so forth. What you don't want to see is dropping taxes and then all of a sudden in 6 years having to raise it $1 million or $1.25 million. I would want to get and start taking the budget line item by line item by line item. The little things that I don't like about the budget is, for example, you have, believe it or not, golf cart pack maintenance is $1.8 million a year. But it's in the general budget. I don't agree with that. Because what can happen when it's in the general budget is if they fall short in other areas, they can reach in and grab that money, and our number one amenity in our community suffers for that. I would want to earmark, and we keep some of that golf cart in the general budget, but I would want to earmark golf cart path and golf cart maintenance. That is our number one amenity in our community, and that needs to be earmarked out so we are responsible and we can continue to move that project forward.
Mayor Fleisch?
I guess I'm responding to not having a mill cut. Currently, our paving budget is $1.8 million. Paving for golf cart paths is $665,000. 1 mill is equal to about $2 million. What Mr. Imker is suggesting is basically taking us back where we were when we had that ticking time bomb when we first were on council, when the previous councils had hired a lot of public service people, and then they ended up having to let go of the public works people in order to balance their budget. And what we need to do is fix our infrastructure. Our infrastructure has suffered for many, many years, even prior to us being on council. The spillway crevices did not get there overnight. That was erosion over decades for that dirt to shift. So, and then Mr. Imker was on the infrastructure advisory group that came up with the SPLOST list. And he had pitched this idea to them as well, and they rejected it because it does sound good. It sounds good to reduce it, but we will be right back where we are now in 6 years. Thank you.
Okay, we'll start with Mr. Thompson on this one. What should be done in Peachtree City to encourage young families to move and stay here?
A lot. An awful lot. It's interesting, we had a meeting with Casey Cagle, I believe Mayor Fleisch was there as well, and he gave a great speech, and he had mentioned that Georgia, and Vanessa, correct me if I'm wrong, is right now currently the #1 state in the country for business. We're going to have 4.5 million people moving into the metropolitan area in the next 10 years. And we are not close to being ready for it. So we have to get out of the 1980 mentality, and we have to understand. We were at a time when we all grew up, we all wanted big houses and a big yard. Things have changed. We're in a global economy where companies cannot attract. I spoke with Eaton, and they're having to build a facility in downtown because they can't get employees to come here. So, and they've also worked with their employees to give them 4 10-hour days, or some employees that with special permission to work from home because nobody wants to come to Peachtree City. Peachtree City is a proximity to the airport, has a great, Fayette County schools are awesome, and we can attract people. We believed in our own hype, and for 20 years we've done nothing to address it. The bubble is starting to collapse. We have Coweta pushing at us from the west, and Fayetteville pushing at us from the east. These are things we never had to worry about before. But we need to get some experts in here, some really smart people, and start paying attention and get our heads out of the sand and quit being short-sighted and move forward.
Thank you. Mayor Fleisch?
Could you repeat that again? It's about young families. If you could repeat the whole thing,
Certainly.
please, Amy.
What should be done in Peachtree City to encourage young families to move and stay here?
And some of the things we are actually laying the groundwork for now. And by just doing and attracting, by taking care of the city, we are attracting younger families, and that is happening. But Mr. Thompson's not totally wrong. What we have to do is also think about adding to our space for industrial space, and that would be the only annexations that seem to me to be really worth looking at, because if we bring more businesses here, the tax burden on the residential and the high prices for the younger families, that's part of the problem with attracting young families. Our entry level, our average fair market value in Peachtree City is now $330,000, and for a young family, that's a tough price point. So that's the housing issue is one of many issues that could help with bringing in young families.
Thank you. And Mr. Imker?
I believe there's a lot of issues that go into this. I'm going to highlight 3 of them. The first one is jobs. Young families need jobs to come here. And rezoning our industrial parks to residential isn't going to do it. We need to keep that industrial sites open, have these people come in, bring in 50, 100 jobs or more every year, per company even. There's prime industrial that is ready to be rezoned, and I don't want to see it happen. The second part is you got to reduce our mill rate. If we're now one of the highest taxed cities in pretty much the entire state, there's no reason for that now with SPLOST passing. What would you do if suddenly the budget added $6 million to it? Last year's budget, just think of that, added $6 million to it. If you can't manage the infrastructure needs and enhance the city with that additional extra money, then I can't help you. But that's what SPLOST did. Including a one-mill tax reduction, we still have $6 million that we didn't have before for the next 6 years. I'm sorry, but we got to do that. The third piece I wanted to mention is we got to keep our education department at the best it can be. That's an additional thing that brings young families here. So jobs, the taxes lowered, and the education.
Thank you.
After this question, we'll have 2 more.
Mayor Fleisch, do you feel that WASA should be controlled by the city council and mayor, since the city council guarantees their bonds?
Well, what we passed this summer was a resolution to go to the state legislature to make the Peachtree City Mayor and City Council actually the board members for WASA. And that is something that passed unanimously, and one of the best things about that is that we're keeping it as an authority. So it's a separate funding source. When you pay your sewer bill, it goes directly to WASA, as it always has. And so it's keeping it separate. If there are any efficiencies to be gained with the city, it can be done with intergovernmental agreements if we find that we could share the mechanics or something like that. But overall, the having WASA board being under the control of the city council, I think is a good thing, and it's going to happen in the state legislature this year.
Mr. Imker?
WASA is an interesting animal. Set up a long time ago, I believe in the 90s, purchased for an outrageous price, hence the large bills we're paying now to pay off $20+ million bond. I agree with Mayor Fleisch. Somehow the citizens need to be able to hold somebody accountable to WASA. Right now, once they are appointed, the board members, there's 5 of them, once they are appointed to city council, they are no longer accountable to you, the citizens. That has to change. Mayor Fleisch's and the current council's solution is a good one. Any way that we can wrestle that over to the council or some other mechanism is good with me. I like the idea of sharing resources. 6-7 years ago, I showed WASA how they could save $1 million a year, eliminating some duplication of jobs, utilizing the resources of both the city with the economy of scale. There was ways to do this, but appointing WASA members the way they are now isn't the solution. Whether we bring them under a Public Works Department or leave them as an authority with intergovernmental agreements, that's 6s to me, half a dozen type. As long as the citizens eventually have a voice in their sewer bills, and that's the bottom line. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Thompson?
So the question was, WASA under city rule or as is?
Correct. Do you feel that WASA should be controlled by city council?
Well, it's a great question and a very slippery slope, and it really depends on who you talk to. If you talk to all the people in favor of WASA, it should never happen. And if you talk to the government, it's exactly what should happen. My number one concern is, initially, without getting in the weeds, would be that I haven't heard anybody complain about their sewer. I haven't heard anybody complain about smells in their neighborhood or overflows of sewer. I haven't heard anybody complain about repairs taking too long to take place in our sewer system. We haven't got letters from the federal government regarding our sewer system. We haven't got letters from the state regarding our sewer system. My concern is that the mayor and council is so inundated right now. We have so many issues to deal with that we don't have time to deal with sewer as well. We've got traffic, and we've got traffic. We've got to look at our recreation facilities. We've got to look at, I think we need to revisit broadband high-speed fiber. We've got too many other things that we need to deal with, and we're going to put this on top of that. Is kind of seemed a little bit knee-jerk to me, but again, I understand their position as well to have a little bit more control over it. But again, our council and our mayor are the ones that appointed these people. I would hope that they would have vetted them to do what they need to do for the city.
Okay, Mr. Imker. We sit between Fayetteville and Noonan. They both have traffic bypass routes in place. Would you pursue this avenue as a solution in talks with GDOT?
Absolutely. We need to find previous council member candidates up here have pretty much the same solution. We need to find either northern and or southern bypass around us. And to do that, we need to work with our own county commission. We need to work with the Coweta County Commission. We need to work with GDOT to find a solution, a joint solution to find that alternate route. Without it, Peachtree City is going to continue to have the nightmare we have every workday between 4:30 and 6 o'clock in the evening. I'm only 2 blocks away from that intersection near City Hall. I know what it's like. I can hear it from my home at that time of day. So yes, I would pursue an alternate route. It's going to cost, of course, but that's where the state, GDOT, can actually ask for federal funds to help do it. This county is familiar with doing these kind of things that they used 10 years ago with the quote bypass. That's a similar thing that they can do for Peachtree City. But we all need to work together, those 4 entities, County, Coweta County, GDOT, and our Peachtree City Council to make it happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Thompson?
So the question was working with other communities, other counties on a bypass?
Yeah, or would you pursue a bypass?
Well, yeah, yes, absolutely. Again, I go back, I would bring in the traffic experts and address it. Now it's hearsay, but people I've spoken to said that Coweta County has reached out to us to look at certain scenarios, and we don't seem to be reaching back. My concern with Peachtree City a little bit has always been, and hopefully don't offend anyone, but where we think that we are a bubble, and we have been a bubble for a long time. 20 years ago we were a bubble, but things are changing, and people think that things can't happen when you're a bubble. Well, they can. So it's imperative that you work with Tyrone, Sonoya, Fayetteville, and the county governments in every way imaginable and get along with these people so we can collectively do what's best for ourselves, most importantly, because our citizens are what is most important, but collectively addressed outside of our city and all the other areas surrounding us, because ultimately everything is going to affect us one way or the other.
Thank you. Mayor Fleisch?
I'm not sure specifically where these routes would be if they were chosen, so I'm going to bypass the bypass. But as far as working with other entities, yes, of course. We've already been talking to Coweta. I'm not sure where that information is coming from. GDOT. I have breakfast with the mayors once a month. I was fortunate enough to be elected by my peers to be a member of the Georgia Municipal Association Board of Directors. And so we talked to the folks from Fairburn. And that's why I missed that GOP breakfast. The mayor of Fairburn invited me over that day, and that was very nice. So we all talk to one another, all of South Fulton. Plus there is something called the 74 Gateway Coalition, which is currently doing the study of 74 and the effects of traffic, and 7485. So 7485, I think the solution to that, or the cloverleaf, is a lot closer than we think. I've forgotten the date. The other thing is, when I went to GDOT on October 2nd, they said in order to get another interchange on 85, you have to fill out a form, and it takes 20 years. So I said, you should probably start now. But those things can happen. We just have to start working together to make them happen.
Thank you.
Was that the second one? I'm sorry.
Mr. Thompson, one of the 2 most important issues facing Peachtree City in the next 4 years, and how do you propose to address them?
Well, I mean, it keeps going. You're not going to fix traffic in 4 years, but you've got to start sometime. And again, my number one issue is that we have a traffic report from 2014 that says you have to address all the way south of Rockaway Road, all the way to Tyrone, and nobody's done nothing. Absolutely nothing. Traffic affects everything. It affects quality of life. It affects, I've spoken to many of the restaurants and some of the businesses at the avenues in that area. Their numbers are down. You know why their numbers are down? Traffic. People can't get to them. And it was said earlier, it's all about through traffic. It's not traffic that's coming to our city. What you want to do is get traffic around your city so all of your citizens can freely go and enjoy what our city has to offer. You don't want that. It's kind of like, I put it this way. It's 75, 85 is 54. And we have the mentality, let's not address 285. Let's just make everybody drive right through downtown Atlanta. So what's happened is these businesses are suffering. I've talked to them. Their numbers are down, the traffic is killing, and when you got traffic, you have quality of life issues, you've got timing issues, you've got pollution issues, and the list goes on and on. So traffic, I would look at revisiting, your second point, I would really be interested in looking at high-speed fiber. Everybody's doing it, we have to address it. I don't know if it's economically feasible, but we would have to really look at that and be transparent and see if that makes sense, because that's kind of the new thing that's coming. So those are the two things I would address immediately.
I must have been looking at the wrong calendar.